The coffin lid slammed closed over the body of my husband, making a harsh sound that echoed around the frigid chapel. I inhaled sharply, and the black fabric of my veil smothered my mouth, choking me with darkness. I entwined my fingers tightly in front of me and counted slowly, imagining myself becoming lighter with each number. He was gone. Gone forever. Those are the first few lines in the book by Alice Evania, Stars May Burn. This book is coming out on June 7th. I was honored to be given an arc of this book and to get to read it early, and I can't wait to talk about it with you. But before we get to that, let me introduce myself. I'm Chantel. I am the face behind the channel Fairly Bookish. If you love fairy tales, fantasy, romantasy, myths, legends, historical fiction, or anything that is low to no spice, and you want to chat, please subscribe, like. Those are the kinds of books that I review here. Those are the kinds of books that I love, and I absolutely love talking books with new friends. Stars May Burn is the first in a 2-book series. It is written by an incredible author. Any book that I've ever read of Alice's has been phenomenal. Her writing is perfection, and her storytelling and her world building are absolutely fantastic. So I always know right up front that I'm not going to be disappointed whenever I read one of her books. This was not an exception to that rule. From the first line to the last, it was beautifully done, and I cannot wait for the second book because, as she warned in the preface, this book has a pretty big cliffhanger. If you hate cliffhangers, don't read this one until the second one comes out. It shouldn't be too much longer after the first one releases, so you don't have to wait forever, but just consider yourself warned. So this series is set in a world that has medieval vibes. Medical research is still developing. People don't necessarily have the means or the knowledge to fight severe infections, and they're still understanding the properties of plants and how to use them as medicine. The magic in this world also comes from elements. From what I understand, it is mostly extracted from certain types of metal or minerals and then combined in different forms and different ways to harness different properties and elements in nature to enhance or give yourself powers that you just don't naturally have. So people don't have magic in and of themselves. They get magic by these devices or these things that they create that give them special powers or abilities. So this is the story of Sophie, a 20-year-old newly widowed woman who has been used by her father her entire life for his own profit and gain. She has been told that her only purpose and her only value is whatever she can do to elevate his status and his wealth. She was married off to an old man who was one of his business partners, who, as we just read, passed away not that long after they were married. Her husband was unkind to her, he mistreated her, and she was unable to give him the only thing he wanted from her, which was a child. So after he died, she was hoping that she could go to his estate, her husband's estate, which she had inherited upon his death, just live out her life because she felt unwanted, unvaluable, and nobody else would want a woman who was widowed and young and could not produce an heir. Her father had other plans, and he immediately took over her inheritance from her husband's death. He brought her back home to his estate and immediately basically tried to sell her on the marriage market again, and told her basically, if you don't cooperate, then your sisters are going to suffer and you are useless to me. On the other hand, you have Kaston. He is the illegitimate child of the king, and the king has been trying to end him for a while now because he is a threat to the king's son's throne. And he does this by sending him into impossible battles and hoping that he doesn't make it. However, Kaston keeps making it and nobody can figure out how. In fact, this kind of scares them because it makes him seem larger than life, and they don't know how he's doing it. They think he's probably violent and cruel and terrible because he just goes into these horrible battles and comes out relatively unscathed, and nobody likes or trusts him very much except for the people within his own land holdings. He had happened to see Sophie at some point when she was married to her first husband. When she was out in a garden, he saw how she came to life, sketching and studying the plants. And even though he didn't know her, he observed enough of how she was treated by her father, her lady's maid, and her husband to know that they were crushing her soul and spirit, and it really bothered him. So when he saw that her father was immediately putting her back out as a pawn in his game, he decided that he was going to marry her. For one, he didn't know how else to save her from a bad situation. And for two, he expected that he would not live that much longer based on his father's continued attempts to end him. And when he passed, he was going to leave his home and lands to her. And in his will, he would make sure that only she could ever manage them. They could not be taken from her by anybody else. Only she, at her death, could assign them to someone else, and it could not be her father. So at first, after they marry, there's a lot of going back and forth where he clearly has feelings for her. He clearly wants her to be happy. He fills the entire house with every kind of plant and flower he can think of because he knows she likes plants and flowers. She's interested in botany, but he doesn't know which ones. So he also doesn't have a lot of experience in relationships, so he just fills his house with plants and flowers, which does make her happy, but the communication part, they aren't so good at that. So the first half of the book, they are trying to figure out how to get over their backgrounds and their hang-ups as far as him thinking he is unlovable and her feeling like her only value is in pleasing somebody else instead of being herself. Now, Kaston is not only a very successful general, but he's secretly investigating some problems within his own kingdom. Now, the neighboring kingdom uses magic from these elements in a way that creates these soldiers that they call the soulless. And if that sounds familiar, it's because it is in a way sort of like a zombie. They have the humanity taken out of them. They are not unalive. That's the main difference. They are actually still living, but they do not have any humanity left. And this is illegal in Kaston's country. However, one of the lords, the main lords of the house, is experimenting with this bad magic and creating what they call the half-souls. And the difference between the soulless and the half-souls is the soulless are almost impossible to end, but they don't spread. The half-souls, however, are able to spread their soullessness by biting. So he is trying to figure out who is doing this, how they're doing it, and get enough proof to bring to the king. He's not entirely sure his father, the king, is not in on it, but he hopes this will be the way to prove that his father still has some small amount of goodness in him. Without spoiling all of the story, because you really have to read it, it's so fantastic. The ending does end on a cliffhanger that you kind of expect parts of it, but how it happened exactly, I didn't see it coming, and that's what made it such an excellent cliffhanger. It also was beautiful because at the end they finally start, Sophie and Kaston finally start figuring out how to communicate, and they finally start being able to find and share love, which they both so desperately need. But this book is so well done. It is a story that you can really get into. It is a story that you will want to see what comes up with next, and that book is going to be Stars May Fall, and I have a feeling based on something in this book that the second book is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. So grab this book, Stars May Burn by Alice Ivania, and get ready for the next one because it's going to be pretty fantastic.